So let's see if we can get this up and running. So awesome to be back at the Umbraco Festival. I was here, I think, as the slide said, quite a number of years ago. Those hats are still in use. At the HQ, you have to wear the hat if you forgot to log out of your computer, and if someone managed to post in Slack that you're giving beer, then you have to wear it the entire day. I can recommend it. It works really well. You only want to do that once. Anyway, please start by giving it up for Byte 5. Without them, there would be no Umbraco Festival. So Byte 5, you rock. Give them a big hand. So I have too many slides, so I'm going to run really fast. And I want to talk about why we're doing Umbraco and what the future might bring. And of course, I want to maybe share a little bit about whether Umbraco 8 is going to be ready before the new airport in Berlin. This is a race that's been going on for a couple of years, but I think we'll beat them. But first, we have to have some numbers because we forget to update them on our website because we're a tech company, so we don't automate that kind of thing. So people always ask about the numbers, and my favorite number is that we are still the biggest .NET CMS in the world. What you see in this animation behind is it's actually a year or two old, that animation, but it's still kind of cool. It's a number of installations in Umbraco in a single day. So there's about 1,000 installs of Umbraco every single day. And everything, all the numbers just keeps growing. So whether you count in active installations or new installations every day, there's nobody that's close to Umbraco in the Microsoft space. And everything is growing. We are approaching 1,000 certified partners globally, thousands and thousands of certified developers who've been attending the courses. The community is getting close to reaching 250,000. If you're from Denmark, that's a lot of people. If you're in Germany, I know it's not impressive, but it's about the number of people working on finishing the Berlin airport. And it's, no more bad jokes. And of course, we are getting very close to 500,000 active installations of Umbraco. We'll likely reach that this year. And speaking of active installations, one of the things that's kind of funny compared to when I was here the first time was back then Umbraco appealed to what politically correct is called cost-sensitive organizations. It's also people who want things for free or cheap. And then primarily Umbraco was used by small or mid-sized organizations. It still is. Thankfully, but we're also seeing more and more what you could call experienced buyers who is doing their maybe third, fourth, fifth CMS-based projects, and they kind of learned that it's rarely the technology itself that brings, the miracle or makes a project a success. It's actually only a little bit of the success of a project, and they are starting to find Umbraco appealing because we don't promise too much. We are quite humble as a CMS product, and we believe it's the people involved who makes the project come true. And again, we're seeing anything from tiny companies to some of the biggest organizations in the world, and again, anything from Fortune 500 to parliaments in different kinds of the world. The European Union is also using Umbraco now, so it's super cool. But what's kind of best about all this, despite all this growth, we're still a tiny company at Umbraco. Even though we're almost doubled in size last year, we're still just around 40 people. And you can reach us. We love to go out to events, and we managed to kind of keep this friendly vibe in the community, which I think is one of the most important things in this project. So why does Umbraco even exist? It's a very crowded space. Even though there's been some consolidation of the CMS market, it's still a crowded place. There's so many things to choose from. And kind of to help both ourselves, but also the community to define that or understand that, we defined a mission a couple of years ago where we say we We're here to help you deliver delightful digital experiences by making Umbraco friendly, simpler, and social. And the idea with that is basically that we have to make sure that you can create basically whatever you want digitally. That's when we say delightful. It's like it's really nice if it can be beautiful. It's really nice if you can use whatever device you want, because we don't know what's next in digital. And the way we can do that is not by telling you what you can do, but making sure that Umbraco doesn't get in the way, that it's a nice product to use, that it's a nice community to be in, and we really like to work together. And then we used to say Umbraco was simple. I think I said that for the first 5 or 6 code gardens. And then it turned out that simple doesn't exist. So what's simple for me might be super complex for others. When I say I love that you can't do multilingual websites out of the box in Umbraco because very few needs that, then it's a pain in the something for those who actually need to do multilingual websites. But what we can do is making sure that every single release we make is just a little bit better and a little bit simpler than the previous one. And that's actually how we're trying to accomplish this mission. Of course, we also have a vision where we want twice as many Umbraco installations by the end of 2021. We're definitely going to reach that, else we have to slow down. And we believe that 10% of them are going to end up running on Umbraco Cloud, which is an insane number. And whether we reach that or not, time will tell. Kind of the premises or the foundation of what we're all doing, I think, is this idea. We're here to help organizations, and those organizations are being told, you just have to succeed online. This is no matter what industry you're in, almost no matter what size of your organization is. If you really want to succeed, you have to be online. And it kind of sucks for a lot of people because they don't care about online. I guess most of us are super passionate about digital and things that goes through wires. But if you're just a company who've been producing furniture for 100 years, it really sucks. I mean, it's just an annoyance. And those kind of organizations, they wish that there was just a product they could buy, just pay a certain amount of money, and then they are digital. Unfortunately, that's not how the world is, despite that a lot of CMS producers might try to push that message. And what's kind of sad about that is over the last many years, we're actually one of the last CMSs on the planet because everybody else is doing something fancy. They have suites and they're doing experiences and they're doing all sorts of things. We're still just doing a CMS. And all these products, they just become more and more complex. And they kind of forget the basics, which is really about eventually making something that's about content and making sure that it's a product that people can understand. Because then it becomes a tool you can use when you understand something, and then you can create something that's you. Then it's not just a done solution that you pick down from a shelf. Then it's actually the representation of you as an organization online. And that's really what the purpose of going digital should be. And I love this very, very old tweet. It's actually from a conference Janus Boy organized 7 years ago. And Masha said, choosing a CMS, only 20% is about the system. And I think that's might even a high number. Because I mean, basically, most of what makes a CMS project a success, or digital project a success, is the team and the chemistry between the team and the customer. And then the system might help you with the basics and might make sure that it's fun to use afterwards. But essentially, it's all about the team, and that's why we are so obsessed in the Umbraco world of sharing knowledge and building a community and making sure we actually not only have a software product, but we also have an ecosystem. Here's a more recent tweet by Tony Byrne, one of the leading CMS analysts, who made a blog post last year about how CMS vendors struggle with the basics. I translated that into too many to-have-ass features. Basically, again, we as software producers, we always tend to hunt the next big thing rather than making sure that our products is actually very nice to use for the end customers. And again, in digital projects, the magic comes from humans, and that's what drives us as a software vendor or CMS vendor. And basically, the way we are trying to help you is that it's all about the flow in how you work. Whether you're a developer, whether you're an editor or someone else involved in a digital project, the best thing we can do is actually, if you don't even know that you're running Umbraco, then we've succeeded. In fact, that was one of the design ideas behind when we launched version 7, where when you're actually using the system, there's no Umbraco logos anywhere. The only Umbraco logo that there is when you log in on the login screen, and then that Umbraco logo turns into your avatar to kind of symbolize that now it's all about you, it's not about a software product. And basically, all we just want to do is not get in your way. We want to, if you're a developer, we want to make sure that you can do whatever you want. If you're an editor, we want to make sure that we don't block your creative process of putting things online. And I have a small story. If you've been at one of the other festivals the last year, you might have heard it before, but I really love it. It comes down to, it's about producing music, and especially in the space of hip-hop and early electronic music. And it kind of reminds me about what used to be cool and then what went wrong, and then luckily they found a way out of it. Because making music or producing hip-hop tracks used to be all about the message that you wanted to get out there, and very little about technology or process. It was a very simple way you produce the music. And then it became popular, and then there was tons of money involved, and then all of a sudden, people went to huge studios, got lots of producers, and everything became polished, but also in many ways quite soulless. And then about 15 years ago, a Japanese company called Akai introduced this tiny box. It was called an MPC. And don't worry, I'm not going to talk about this for hours, even though I could. This is one of the most genius music products that ever made. It's a very simple thing. It has 16 buttons, and each button can represent a sound. And then again, each button can then be turned into a bar of music. So basically, you can have drums, or you can have cool sounds, or you can have bass lines. You basically have about 2 octaves of notes here. And it's so simple to use. You don't need to know anything about how music works or the theory behind music. But people who had a message they wanted to deliver, they could just experiment with this one. The sound was absolutely awful, but and very low quality. It was actually 8-bit, the first version, very dirty in the sound. But of course, it improved over time. But this was one of the most defining tools for earlier days of hip hop and electronic music, where a lot of it was produced on a machine like that, and these still exist today. What's actually funny is about 10 years ago they disappeared, or 7 years ago they disappeared, and everything got into computers. And again, the things became too polished. Then someone reinvented it. It was actually pioneered by a German company called Native Instruments, who actually made this, but then it was just a software controller. So you got the creativity back, you got the flow, but you had all the amazing technology running on the computer, but you didn't have to know about it. It was all about the flow in your music. And in the same way, we want Umbraco to be the MPC of the CMS world. And that's why it's so important that we are all about the C in the CMS. It's so funny, people kind of forget that the C actually stands for content and not loads of features. It's basically, making a tool that's wonderful to use for people who are obsessed with content. And by that, we really want to be this friendly CMS. And by that, we mean that, we want to be a CMS that sort of works with your flow and doesn't get in the way. Of course, it requires that you actually have something you want to express, whether you're a developer or whether you're an editor, something you want to express digitally. And speaking of that, I don't know if it's the same in Germany, but in Denmark, it's all the rage. Everybody talks about digital, but what people often do is digitalization. And what's the difference? Well, digitalization is when you just basically add, you could say, current to existing processes. You just take what you have, you put it online. You used to have a brochure, you make a website. You used to have a bank, then you make an online bank. You don't reinvent the possibilities that digital gives you. It's kind of the difference between when crappy German taxis that doesn't take credit card try to make an app versus Uber, who kind of tried to reinvent something. Speaking of Uber, you could also say, I don't know if it's the same in Germany, but in Denmark, Uber is illegal, basically because 96% of all the drivers didn't pay tax, among other things. But what's kind of interesting is the Danish tax authorities were actually some of the leading people when it came to digitalization. Very, very early, any Dane could go in and see if they got any tax return. In theory, because the systems always crashed, when it was tax return day. But what's kind of sad about it is the kind of refined and improved the digitalization of the tax authorities, but they didn't reinvent tax authorities digitally. If they had done that, we would never have the Uber problem, because then the tax authority, for instance, could have an API for companies to report tax information. That way, if I was an Uber driver, I could give permission for Uber to report tax, just like I give Google access to, whatever. And that way, they would automatically report tax information, for instance. So that's kind of the difference between being digital, thinking digital, and digitalization. And one of the key things in digital is that it's not just about tech. We've kind of been in a phase for a couple of years where we're all crazy about tech. And we kind of forgot that really content is still king. Netflix is cool, the technology is impressive, but the reason why everybody loves it is because they have quality content, and they keep producing quality content. In fact, they are spending more and more on content and less on tech when you look relatively at their budgets. So really, digital is kind of going from just thinking about tech or data to also think about experiences for humans. We're not an experience system again, but it's still, the point is, it's less about tech and more about how things are perceived. How many have had a watch like this? Not that many runners in here. This is a company called Polar. It's a Finnish company. They used to own the market for gadget-obsessed runners. They were pioneering heart rate monitoring, and they had fancy watches that looked like this. And it took days to set up, almost. It was really clumsy, terrible user experience, but you could see your heart rate, and you could actually run through your heart rate, and you became a better runner, except you would turn it off because it was fucking annoying, because it constantly beeped and told you were running wrong. But maybe, like me, you've had a watch like this. And, they were like the Kodak of running gear. They would be here forever. But then Garmin came, this ridiculous GPS producers that had things in cars, and then they made elegant watches, at least if you were a diehard runner who really want to tell everybody that you were running, because you would have a watch about this size on your wrist, and you would go like this. I'm a runner. But it was easier to use than this one. It was more accurate, but it was still only about data. And even though the watches are more elegant, I've had both. I love running. I've started to run with this. It's a fucking crappy running watch. Technically, it's impressive what they can do. It's also nicer to have on your wrist. But the reason why I use it is because there's this app called Nike Running Club. And it's actually not that much about the data. It's not about your heart rate. It logs your heart rate. It's not about your GPS. It logs all that. But every week, there's new stories. And it says, would you like to do a mindfulness run? I'm like, ooh, I heard mindfulness is cool. Let me have a mindfulness run. So, would you like to run faster? And I say, yeah, hell yeah. And I just tap my wrist, and then there's a story. There's people talking while they coach me running. But it's so low tech, it's just a podcast. But underneath, it logs everything I do in relation to the purpose of that type of run. But it's just content, and it's really, really brilliant design, and it's a brilliant digital experience. And that could be powered by Umbraco. It's not, but it would be cool. And basically, you could say Umbraco should be we want it to be you could call it an operating system for digital business, or like iOS for content, right? So rather than we've all been talking about websites for many years, we're basically talking about delivering content everywhere. And that's what we've tried to build over the last couple of years. There's a funny paradox in product development, though. The paradox is the best products are made by scratching your own itch, right? When I made Umbraco in the early days, it was actually because I thought the other systems out there were either too expensive or they were too clumsy, they were annoying, and then I tried to make my own, just like everybody else. I was a little bit more persistent, so it ended up becoming a success. But the problem is, the more you then focus on your product, the less you use it. The less scratches you can itch, or the less itches you have, you can scratch, of course. English. And that's kind of a paradox, and it's actually quite frustrating when it comes to product development. And it kind of means that as a vendor, you get out of sync with your audience, because you're no longer, you might be an industry expert, but you become less and less an expert in your product, which kind of sucks. On top of that, as you get more successful, you not only have external pressure, which is pressure from your users to do things, you also get internal pressure. There's a lot of things you want to do, but there's also things that people in your support department wants to do. There's something in marketing or sales who wants to do, and actually the worst thing in product is nitpicking. You want to adjust those details that really doesn't matter, because you don't know really what your users wants to do. And at the same time, the patience of your users is dropping, because people are used to new products or improved products coming all the time. The best organizations in digital, they launch lots of times a day. GitHub, they release a new version of GitHub several times a day. Spotify release a new version of their software several times a day. So it's not enough anymore to just listen or try to listen to your customers. They actually want to see some change. And here's two quotes that product people, including myself, have been quoting, and they're total bullshit. One is from Henry Ford. It's this one. Actually, I just always wanted to try this feature. It makes no sense. Anyway. People quote him all the time, where he says about the car and about listening to your customers, that, then he wouldn't have invented the car, he would just have had faster horses. That might be, to use that quote today is total bullshit, because this is more than 100 years ago. Back then, people weren't as educated and didn't have access to as much information as they have today. It's a total ridiculous quote. It was amazing back then, but I don't believe it in today. And then the other one is Steve Jobs, which is basically just people don't know what they want until you show it to them, which might be true, but you're not Steve Jobs. And even if you were Steve Jobs, you're probably not Steve Jobs working at Apple. So that's total bullshit as well. Here's the thing. Here's a chart. Have anybody ever seen this chart? This is called the diffusion of innovation. And of course, if I was more clever, I could remember the professor who invented this. It's basically a representation of people and how curious they are, how early adopters they are. And I can use this one. Look. Here's how many people is really curious about the next big thing. If you're really positive, it's about 16%. The rest doesn't care. And you can translate that into, your users really doesn't care about the next big thing you're doing. They just want something that's a little better. Which is crazy, because in product, we always chase the next big thing. And here's another thing. I believe that not you, but us as product people, We're about as stupid as people in those quotes claim users are, because we're really bad at understanding what users want. In fact, sometimes users come to us and say, it would be awesome if it could do like this, and we're like, no, because we don't understand it. And even though we're trying all our best to try to understand it, maybe the customer or user is not that good at explaining it. And why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because this is why we need participants. In fact, I did a presentation where I talked about this recently, where I talked about how many are familiar with NPS, Net Promoter Score. Raise of hands. All of you know about it because it's the thing that says, on a scale from 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this to a colleague? Everybody's seen that, right? Yep. And the thing is, what everybody wants, all organizations want, is that people say 9 and 10, because that translates into then you are a promoter of a product. Then you love something so much that you will go tell it to all people. When I did that talk, I claimed that we want people to answer 11, because we really don't care about, well, we do care about ambassadors, and those are wonderful, but when people actually start participating in a project, that's where really cool stuff happens. Because then it's more about customers, that have an itch that they scratch, and they give that back, and the product becomes better. It's actually basically what made Umbraco a success. We might not be able to do that anymore, but we can create a platform and a way to develop products that actually builds on that success and gives users a chance to participate in the project. And in fact, it's very easy to do. And you should, of course, do it. It all comes down to whether you as an organization is open or closed, and whether your mindset inside the organization is open or closed. And basically, it's all about what's called wisdom of the crowd, which is a super old phenomenon. It dates back to the ancient Greek history. Everybody today talk about artificial intelligence. If just 1% of all the energy on artificial intelligence were used to promote this idea of collective intelligence, then we would have much better products. And the way it works, this is the first time ever, and hopefully the last, I've been using PowerPoint Smart Art. But I made a chart. Look at this. You can be, how many is familiar with the idea of being competent in either you can be either competent or incompetent, just like you can be conscious or unconscious about it. Anybody ever heard about that? Okay. Anyway, this follows the same model. You can be a closed organization with a closed mindset. Basically, in the product department of a company like that, you just say, we don't care. We might say we listen to customers, we don't care, and you can definitely not help us. It's also the type of organization where when you give them, send them a ticket, they reply back, thank you very much. We're always interested in our customers' needs, and then tumbleweed. You never hear anything. Then you can be an open organization, but with a closed mindset. We've actually been there. I'll come back to that. Then you can be a closed organization with an open mindset. That's actually quite cool. It's organizations like Novo or Lego, who actually, Lego, they make it possible for their customers to submit ideas for new Lego products, and eventually they might put some of them into production. Kind of a cool thing. You can't participate directly, but they actually have an open mindset as a company. And then, of course, Nirvana, aka where Umbraco is today. You can be an open organization with an open product and an open mindset where you're just like, hey, we love talking to customers. And then, of course, you can repeat that process, which is kind of funny because when I started Umbraco, this was how it worked. Because I had nobody to talk to, so I was just really happy that someone wanted to give feedback and maybe participate. But then as the organization grew, we actually unconsciously became an open project, but with a totally closed mindset. We were so busy, and we talked so much internally that we forgot to listen to our customers. And then we kind of actually tried to go down the path of it's actually easier to fix this problem by actually closing down a little bit and then actually trying to consciously work on how can you become more open and then get back in being an open organization with an open mindset. And I'm telling you all about all of this because it's very important for you to understand what actually makes Umbraco so good. It's the participation thing, and it's that we as an organization has become very conscious about how we can drive an open project with an open mindset. And just to give you an idea of how crazy things used to be, we actually was working on V8 before V7 was done. I know how many were at Code Garden in 2014. We actually had a working demo of variants. This was back when V7 sucked. Like sucked big time. And that was because we were product people, so obsessed with making the next big thing, and we weren't using our own product that we didn't know it sucked. We were just like, hey, we just released 7, it's super cool, we fixed the worst bug, it doesn't crash when you install it, next thing. And of course, what was interesting was, then over the last couple of years, we've actually been much better at reaching out to our customers, to our users. We have a team dedicated to actually talking to partners now that gives us feedback. And the last couple of years, we've been working much more on these 4 things, and I'm going to skip through them very fast. When do I need to finish?
Oh, half an hour.
Perfect. Because I have demos. Don't worry, it's not all PowerPoint and smart art. I haven't forgotten my roots. I have things that will crash. So we basically focused on these 4 areas, which was basically about having a more stable core, making sure that we were back at our roots with making a CMS that editors would love, then make sure we were reachable. Back then, you could call us. We had a phone number, but the reception was outsourced, and they would just say, "Oh, it's before 2 o'clock. They don't want to talk to you," because we wanted peace to work. How stupid is that? And then we wanted to share all the success stories, because as you probably know, in Germany, and we're not there yet, there's probably not a lot of people who know about Umbraco in Germany. And one of the reasons is that we are not that good at sharing the success stories. We're really working on that, trying to find great case studies and working with partners, finding all these, just like you might not have known that, Amnesty or Microsoft or Amazon is actually using Umbraco. And we need to tell people that. So in terms of the stable core, the idea was if we could get, we basically wanted to make sure that when you downloaded Umbraco, it was predictable what was about to happen. It shouldn't be a lottery. Like every 3rd time you downloaded the latest version of Umbraco, it might work. And here's something funny. This is how the chart of our product releases were a couple of years ago. You can see that there's a lot of releases that are closely related, and it means that there was a box. So we released something, and then we had maybe 2 or 3 releases right after, because when we got it in the hands of users, there was a lot of bugs we hadn't discovered. This was how it was about a year ago, and it's improved since. You can see the green is actually the CMS releases, and it's much more predictable. We make a release of the CMS every 2 weeks, year round, and more or less, we're really good at making sure that they are stable. We had one very frustrating incident this year where we had to actually release 2 patch releases right after. Really sorry about that, but it's something we're really working on. Number 2 is sharing the success. We didn't used to have a marketing team in Umbraco. In fact, 2 years ago, we didn't. So now we have something called COMA, which is Communication and Online Marketing Astronauts. You could argue that they really wanted to be called COMA and desperately tried to find a name that would match it. But it's our amazing communication team, and they are really productive. They made more than 100 blog posts, more than 40 case stories, and made several improvements to the website, including a new tour section, or it's not new anymore, but a tour section where you can actually read about the features of Umbraco, and also a case section where you can read about cool cases of Umbraco solution. And then finally, this idea about being reachable. It was actually not something that I was conscious about, but we hired some really amazing people over the last 2 years, one of them being Kim Sneum Madsen, who you might know, but he was in charge of customer service in one of the biggest online ERPs in Europe. And he was really obsessed with making sure we would be reachable. And after he got on board, we kind of made this team that's now called SWAT, which is support warriors. What? Help me again. Support warriors and troubleshooters. And again, you could argue that they really wanted to be called SWAT. In fact, so much that I can't remember what it stands for. You could also argue that I should have practiced. Anyway, they are super active. In fact, they've been answering more than 10,000 customer requests over the last year. So think about that. What's most crazy about this is we are an open source company with phone numbers and emails and chat you can contact. We actually want you to contact us, and 60% of people get a reply within 1 hour, and in fact, 50% get a reply within 30 minutes. There's no closed source product that can match those numbers. And it's really cool, and it's all about this idea that we want to be this friendly product, and I'm super proud of this. And we spoke about this Net Promoter Score, and in fact, even though we are so fast at replying, we actually give great replies because customers are really happy. 65 is like fucking awesome, right? The Berlin airport is -100, so you can have the idea. Anyway, let's boil it down and be more specific. We're slowly moving in to demos. So if you're about to fall asleep, wake up. But you have to wait 5 minutes. Because we have to, just then being specific. Now I've been very unspecific. Now I've been very, what is the soft values of how we want to do Umbraco? What is it then actually that makes Umbraco a success? It is that it's a very lean core CMS. What does that mean? It means, you have a very flexible data model with version content. The basics is there. We have a very nice granular security model. After 7.6, it's actually enjoyable to use. The editor experience is super fast, and that's not only in milliseconds, but it's actually how editors can work. They don't have to move too much between sections to get their work done. The delivery engine of Umbraco is fast and it scales, whether you just want to run on a shared host or if you want to run scalable on Azure or whatever. And we got open and mature APIs in both the front end, so that's how you implement the site, the templates, and in the back end, so you can tailor the editor experience for editors. And this thing about having mature APIs, it's actually quite important because there's a lot of tools that have open APIs, but we've had so much experience over the last years of making sure that they're actually usable and break as little as possible, almost. Then on top of that, we don't have a lot of features, but we have a feature ecosystem, which I actually think is kind of the coolest thing about Umbraco. It doesn't come with a lot of features out of the box, but it has a built-in app store. Unfortunately, we're developers, so it's called a package repository, which is not that sexy and doesn't ring a bell for customers, but it is basically what it is. And what I love about that is these features aren't built in a lab in a product company that wanted to chase the next big thing. This is people who've made real projects and thought, hey, I'm repeating myself this time. Let me turn it into something that's reusable. And at the same time, these people who are building that are also friendly people that shares it with the community, which is absolutely amazing. And I think this is one of the coolest things. In my original slides, I had a video that just showed you how to install personalization groups from the Umbraco back office. I removed it for timing, but just try to do it. I know you can do it, but just think about that you have a CMS, it doesn't do personalization. You click developer, you search for personalization, you click install, and 30 seconds later, you actually have a personalization feature built in, just delivered, like if it was an iPhone. It's kind of cool. And notice I said like an iPhone, not an Android. There's no rootkit. There's no backdoors in Umbraco packages. They're friendly because they are monitored by the community. You don't just get into the back office by putting a package up on our. It actually has to have been tested and have given feedback from more than 15 people before you can install it through the back office. Then on top of that, over the last couple of years, we've been working on a cloud platform for Umbraco. And again, this is about bringing predictability to your projects. And if you're an old Umbraco person, you may think you don't need this. I would argue you probably do. But But for people who are new to Umbraco, if you actually start to read some of the blog posts of agencies approaching Umbraco today, they're using cloud and they love it. Because they don't need to learn about how to set up Umbraco, they don't need to learn about deployment workflows, they don't need to reinvent a lot of wheels that basically brings no value. And that's the whole purpose of the cloud platform. It's actually, and we live in a world where it's impossible to get great developers. I mean, we're so spoiled. But we also need to make sure that the time spent for developers is actually useful time. Because else, we're just gonna repeat doing the same thing over and over again of things that doesn't deliver any value. And then eventually, Umbraco projects become too expensive. So we need to make sure as developers that we spend our time on making things we haven't done before. And anything that can be automated should be automated, and anything that can be automated without us investing any time is going to be awesome. So that's basically what cloud is about. And as you can see here, how many have been using cloud? Just raise of hand. Okay, the rest of you should definitely try it out. It's basically just hosted Umbraco. You can do whatever you want and everything you're used to with Umbraco. But the difference is you don't have to set it up. You can work locally if you want to. Anyone can see what's going on your project. If you want to invite a colleague, you just click a button, you invite a colleague, they become an Umbraco user, and they get access to a Git repository where they can work and clone the project locally. Once they've been working locally, they can just push their changes, whether it's code changes, whether it's changes to doc types, templates, or anything. They can just push that to live. Or even if you are multiple developers, you just add a development by clicking a button, and then you get a development environment, including a deployment workflow of both code and Umbraco content between the environments. And you don't have to do anything, except pay us money. But in return, we invest all those money back into the product. Anyway, definitely go check it out. And we see more and more customers using Umbraco. You probably heard about Carlsberg, but they actually now got more than 200 sites running. And that's both their brand sites, but also their official site for the public listed company in 45 markets. They're also using a feature of cloud called Baselines, which is also used by the Danish Football Associations, which has more than 450 sites running. And the idea with the baseline is you create one project, and then you can create a new project based on the old project. And technically, it's a Git clone, which means that if you need to roll out new updates or bug fixes, you make them in your baseline, and you can send them to all the different sub-projects. If you think about this from an agency perspective, it's kind of cool, because even though agencies always think big thoughts for their customers, and any solution is different, I guess you kind of repeat yourself all the time. So you can have like a single boilerplate of how you do an Umbraco website, including some basic functionality, and then you can actually add improvements to that functionality, and then just roll it out to all your sites. Same goes if you found let's say a cross-scripting issue in one of your standard modules, you can fix it one place and roll it out to all the sub-sites. DBU, or the Danish Football Association, they roll out new features for all these clubs every single month. Another thing is it's Coop. It's like the Tesco or Lidl of Scandinavia. They also got lots of sites running, and that's both the chain sites, but also campaign sites, where again they're using baselines, including a custom forms workflow, where when they create forms for campaign sites, data can automatically be added to their CRM. And again, they can set all this up with almost no energy. And this is a very slow-working organization. You could call them maybe even a very heavy, waterfall-y organization, yet they actually managed to roll out more than 20 sites last year, which is kind of cool. Last thing is this thing that we believe in best of breed rather than suite. We don't do email marketing. We don't do marketing automation. We don't do e-commerce. We have an ecosystem that can do that. And the best part of this is they don't even need to be Umbraco experts, because Umbraco is so open that you can take almost any SaaS-based engine when it comes to digital marketing and integrate with Umbraco. And you can also easily, as you probably know, integrate legacy or on-premise systems with Umbraco. And again, this means that we can focus on what we are passionate about. And then people who are passionate about making commerce systems can integrate with Umbraco. And people who are passionate about personalization can do that. And here's a pretty cool case. It's a Scandinavian hardware chain called Power. And it's, old school. They have physical stores. But they're also online. And here's something that's a very ugly screenshot. But this is actually pretty insane. They are running SAP, which is German. It's quality. Yet, you can integrate it with Umbraco. But of course, it's German, so you have lots of information. In fact, there's more fields here than... no, I was about to say another bad joke about the Berlin airport. I'll stop. Anyway, they can edit their SAP information directly in Umbraco, including changing prices. And when they change prices here, the prices are, of course, changed online, but also e-ink price tags out in the store. And of course, they get information live from their SAP information. And why is this cool? This is not cool, but this is cool. This is the grid editor. And an editor can just search their SAP directly. And then they can insert what's basically a product ID and see it as a visual representation, and they can just move it around in the grid. And depending on where they insert it, it's displayed in a different way. So think about that, and this is kind of cool. Editors gets a really nice visual representation of how to work with things, but it's live ERP data. And this is kind of cool, and this is one of the examples of why it's awesome that you can integrate and customize and tailor Umbraco based on the customer. Here's another video. It's showing AI together with Umbraco, and I'm going to skip it. And you're like, no, we want to see that. But you don't, because there's a guy today who made something that's even more cool, and you should go see his session about using AI together with Umbraco. Anyway, yep, see that one. Anyway, what's next in Umbraco land then? Now we've been talking about everything we've seen. We talked about the process over the last couple of years. We have 15 minutes left, and we're busy. So buckle up. I'm going to recap our mission. You know that? Blah, 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 blah. Friendly, simple, social. What does that mean? It means that we're going to use it for more than just making a web CMS. Because, as I mentioned many times today, it's all about content. Content, 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 digital everywhere. Move on. Content is everywhere. This is why you need Umbraco Headless. And you're like, what is Umbraco Headless? I'm going to show you in a minute. And then you're going to be like, but we want to see more. And then I say, yes, you should go to Mads and Rune's session. So, it's just a day full of wonderful things. Anyway, this is an appetizer. What is the purpose of a headless CMS? It is, you love the editor experience of Umbraco, but you don't care about the website. You want to use it for something else. You're like, no, I don't. After this, you will. Ooh. And again, it might be headless, but it's still heartful. This was where you were supposed to say, oh. It might be headless, but it's still heartful. Yes. So it's basically the same back office, but the idea is there's no setup. It's a pure SaaS solution running on cloud. And yes, you can do all this already. If you know how to create, if you know how Umbraco works, if you know how to create web APIs, if you want to run it yourself, but if you don't care about all this, you just click a button and you get all of it, which is cool. The idea is you don't use Umbraco as the delivery engine. You don't use Razor template. You just get content through a REST API. And on top of that REST API, you have some really nice clients to work with. For Node.js, for .NET Standard, which means that you can use it in Xamarin apps, in .NET Core, and even old school .NET, which means you can inject content everywhere. And by everywhere, what do I mean? Let me show you a small demo. Now we'll have stuff breaking. Are you ready? Yes. So we're used to doing websites, and that's cool. But now I want to do something else. I want to remove my slides from the big screen, so you can actually see what I'm doing on my own screen. Ta-da. So this is my chatbot. And you're like, fuck chatbots. That's like something in the 90s that didn't work. Lots have happened since then. Chatbots are actually super cool, but chatbots are boring if they can't answer anything. And the only reason, and the only way they can answer something is if they have content. Are you connecting the dots? So I can say, hello. And it will say something back. If you need someone's phone number, birthday, role, whatever, I can scroll up. Hang on. Then I can ask it. Because now Umbraco is such a big company that I have forgotten how Shannon looks or what his phone number is. How many here would love to have Shannon's phone number? Okay. So I can just say, what is Shannon's phone number? Wait for it. I'll just go to Umbraco, and then we'll see why is it able to answer what it did here. You see, you get a nice photo of Shannon. And, you don't get the phone number because he's asleep when you're awake. But how do I get this information? I get it from here, which is kind of cool. Now, how does this know that what it needs to look up? It's using AI. How does it deliver through a chatbot? It's using a chatbot framework. All of this has nothing to do with Umbraco, but what we want is the content, right? I can also talk to it, and it will talk back, like if I want to make an Alexa or a Cortana app. Anyway, what's really cool about this is that it's almost no lines of code. All of this is using the Microsoft Bot framework, which again has nothing to do with Umbraco. This is a sample bot framework app. It's using something called LUIS, which is artificial intelligence to understand the intent of what you ask and find keywords. And basically what I do here, let's see. As you can see, here's the code. So I basically say, I have some information, I have an intent, and I have some entities. And entities is keyword. This is all handled by the chatbot framework. So based on that, I ask Headless, do you have any replies that matches this intent? And I do that in a very, very simple way. Again, all of this is not Umbraco code. This is chatbot code. Now I go to the Umbraco code. This is, let me just bump up the font size here. Like this, can you read it? I actually didn't bump up the font size. Now, nope. This is the hardest part of Headless. This is all that's done with Headless. I installed a NuGet package, I created a Headless site, and then I say, dear client, I want to make a query where the name is equal to the intent of what's searched for, and then I want to get the first intent. It will then search the Umbraco content for document types or documents which has the document type of intent and has the name that matches whatever was searched for. So let's see if we can find this Shannon thing. You see, I was asking for information about a person. And underneath a person, I have replies. So I say, please, dear Headless, give me any children of the intent that's a reply, like this, document type reply, and where it has some text that matches the keywords. In this case, the keywords were Shannon. Does that make sense? So it's about 15 lines of code to integrate Umbraco Headless together with a chatbot and then create a digital experience that has nothing to do with websites, but it's actually pretty cool. And again, you could reuse this content everywhere. This is just one use case, and you should come to Rune and Masse's session to see other examples of Headless. So here's some other use cases. Again, mobile apps. Out of the box, we have support for Xamarin. So if you want to create iOS, Android, or if you're a masochist, Windows Phone apps. If you live in the 90s, that's even possible. New technology, old technology matched together. It's possible pretty much out of the box. You can make, of course, single-page applications that just need some JSON back. And again, we also have a Node.js client. So if you don't even know about Umbraco and don't know about .NET, you can actually use Node.js to create Umbraco websites. Chatbots, old school line of business apps. I heard about a bank, which is relevant because we're in Frankfurt, that used a enterprise CMS to translate mouse over texts. Think about it. It makes sense, but maybe it's, you could say, a very big solution to a very small problem. Anyway, the idea is kind of cool, that you can actually use Umbraco to actually integrate help text, etc. in application. And of course, if you're like, when is Umbraco coming with support for .NET Core? Shut up, use headless. We even have examples of how to use it with .NET Core. And then you're like, how do I do this? We're open for beta. We are sending invites out at the moment. And if you want to get an invite for headless, email us at headless@umbraco.com. And if you're like, no, I don't want that, go to Rune and Mads' session, and you will be convinced. And you will leave thinking headless is the future. And then I'll say, no, not for everything. Remember, Umbraco, vanilla Umbraco still makes sense. Headless is very cool with the idea of making digital experiences outside of just a website. Sweet. Then I have another little preview. It's the Berlin Airport, aka meet Umbraco 5, Umbraco 5, Umbraco 8. And of course, this is because if this works, it's a miracle. Anyway, you've all been wondering what is happening to Umbraco 8, and I can say we are finally actually working on it. In fact, it's more or less the only thing the CMS team is working on. Voila. You're like, no, it looks different. Yes, and it's a good thing. It's going to be looking even more different. What you're seeing right now is, of course, heavy work in progress, and everything might change. But there was one feature I would love to show you. So I have a site here, which is a very big site and a very complex site because it has pretty much no content. But what I do have is the ability to do multilingual. So I have a page here, and let me put a photo. This is a very English chair. And now I want something that's very German. So I can basically just swap. I can edit the same note, but in another language. I can say, sehr. Is that very Deutsch? Almost. Anyway, and I can add a very Deutsch chair, which would be something like this, where Per sits very comfortable like this. Anyway, then of course I can publish, and I can choose to publish the German one because that's the only one that has been changed. So it's checked up by default, or I can publish multiple languages at once. Anyway, I'm just going to publish this one, and of course it doesn't work. As I said, it's work in progress, and it's a miracle that this even works. Anyway, can I even save it? No. Let me remove the image, and I can save it, and then it doesn't make any sense. Nope. Anyway, as I said, demo fail. But let me show you something cool, how easy it actually is to work with this. Languages now look different, and I can add a new language. So there are Swiss people here, right? So of course we know that Switzerland people is less Berlin airport-ish than Germans. Which means that, of course, for Switzerland, it should be mandatory. It's not the default language, but it should be mandatory. And this means that I can create variations of pages, but I have to, if I have any mandatory values for this language, I can't publish the node without also making sure that there's a translation for that given language. Also, when it comes to content pickers, etc., of course, I can also just browse my site like this, but I can also browse it in any of the variants that are there. Look, I tried to speak German. Die Site. Or is it das Site? No. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, the point is, V8 is actually real. It's work in progress. The entire team is working heavily on it, and we are making great progress. The focus of V8 is 3 things. 1, or actually 4. There's some technical cleanup. Then there's variations, as you can see, and we're starting just by language variants. So 8.0 will be language variants. Later on, we'll put segment variants on top of it. Then we have another concept called infinite editing, which is kind of continuing the process we've had about not being like working with your editors. Right now, for instance, if you upload an image in a media picker and you actually want to change the crop, you have to upload the image, you have to save it, then you have to edit the image, set the crop, go back, and then it's done. With infinite editing, you can just keep on opening windows and editing things, and then you can always return back to the original thing. It's very abstract. Those of you coming to Code Garden, you might have something very cool to see. And then the last thing we want to add to V8 is something we call content apps. If you notice this, you're panicking, and you're like, where is my tabs? I love my tabs. Too bad, we don't have tabs anymore. Now, all the tabs will just be listed down here. We're working on a nice way to navigate between them because we want space up here for other things. And we've been wanting this for a very long time, which was actually why we started limiting the number of tabs you could have visible in Umbraco a couple of years ago. One of the things we've noticed is that you might want to work with content, but you don't want to edit it. You want to know something about it, say, how's my analytics performing? Or is my content accessible? Or I'm using SEO check and I want to know if it's SEO compatible. And what people do is they put these things either as custom property editors here, which makes no sense, or they hide them inside this action menu that then becomes extremely long. What we want to is being able to add applications up here that work with your content but doesn't edit the content. And if we're very lucky, you're going to see a preview of that at Code Garden as well. Anyway, that was a very, very dangerous sneak peek at V8. It is happening, and it will come before Berlin Airport is successful. One last thing, because I don't have any time left. 1 minute? 1 minute. Then what is social? You know, we had that friendly, now we had something about content. What is this social thing in the mission? It's basically about the culture. And it's this totally wonderful thing where you can have lots of strategies as a company, but culture will always win rather than the strategy. So we could have a strategy where we said, we want people to contribute, and it would never ever succeed if we didn't have a culture that encouraged you to be friendly, to share, etc. And I think that's my favorite thing about Umbraco is that we have this culture of being friendly and being curious, which means that you can actually you actually experiment and you actually dare to share it because you know that it will be received in a friendly manner. And if people don't receive it in a friendly manner, they really need to get together or find another place to be, because in the Umbraco world, we are very tolerant of people who dare to share. We should be that. And we should also be very nice to people who share. So if you rely on people's packages, don't just expect bugs to be fixed. Try to see if you can participate in their projects, or else try to ask, could we pay to get this bug fixed? Because people who shares are actually a really friendly bunch, and for some of them it can actually be very stressful with all the demands coming. So make sure that you're nice to them. Because basically it is kind of what makes Umbraco. And this is this async innovation I then talked about, buzzword on buzzword. But look at this. This is the European Council. They launched last year, 25 languages. It's really nice to know that your tax money is wisely spent, because no matter what content is published here, there is 25 translators hard at work translating things that nobody will read. But then you're like, how can you use 25 languages in Umbraco? Did they have access to a very buggy version of V8? No, they use V7. Then they use Vorto by Matt, and then they put some improvements on top of them on that to match their workflow, including automated translation systems, which is super cool. And they're coming to Code Garden and sharing how they did things, which is very cool. Here's another example. I mentioned this already. There's no personalization in Umbraco, but actually Andy Butler, and he released personalization groups. It's super cool. You can have personalized content based on location, time of day, how many times people visited your site, etc. And it's just an add-on. Here's another thing. Microsoft Cognitive Services released last year. Within 2 weeks after it was released in preview, there was an Umbraco integration using Microsoft AI and Cognitive Services to identify things in images and to organize the media library in an automated way. This is why Umbraco is successful, because we have the coolest, most curious and friendliest community on the planet. So, in 2018, we have V7. It's here. You should use it. You shouldn't wait for V8. You should use V7. It's stable, it's polished, and it will keep receiving updates. But the focus right now is really on V8 in terms of development. We're also seeing headless as a new option, which means that your customers and you as agencies can start using Umbraco in a very easy way to deliver digital content everywhere to any type of device and any platform. And of course, at one point, V8 will start a new chapter where we are going to be able to use Umbraco for even more complex solutions, but it's still simple. You know, I saw how I could edit multiple languages in a UI that's at least as simple to use as what we have. When I implement it, I don't need to do anything as a developer to support multiple languages. It just works out of the box by routing domains or URLs. And again, we're still open and we're friendlier than we've ever been, more reachable than we've ever been. Thank you very much. I'm here the entire day, and if there's one thing I really, really hope is that you come to me and see me during the day if you have any ideas or any questions. I really, really, really love to talk to people in the community. Have a wonderful German festival, and thank you very much.